Bright visuals, colourful characters, and playful designs, all hallmarks of a Nintendo game. Though not your typical Nintendo game, Advance Wars can certainly pass for one thanks to the developers at Intelligent Systems. You might be familiar with some of their more recent works, but they didn't always create software for Nintendo. Around the 1980s, Nintendo tried to shift their focus to video games. At the time, they were understaffed and needed help from external companies, and eventually they found 4 partners: Pax Softnica, SRD, HAL Labs, and Intelligent Systems. Each of the 4 companies went on to help Nintendo develop a few games, but we're only interested in Intelligent Systems for now. Having partnered with Nintendo, Intelligent Systems were then put to work creating development tools, and they occasionally co-developed games with Nintendo's R&D 1. After getting their feet wet, they moved on to creating games of their own. Their first focus was to create simulation games, and so 2 franchises were born: Famicom Wars and Fire Emblem. The success of Famicom Wars spawned a plethora of sequels spanning multiple console generations. However, it would not be until 2001 that the Wars franchise finally made its way over to the West as Advance Wars. Initially developed as a launch title for the GBA, Advance Wars started with Nintendo asking Intelligent Systems to help them make the game. Of course, since Intelligent Systems were no strangers to the Wars franchise, they agreed. The only difference this time around was the watchful eye of Nintendo. During the early stages of development, Intelligent Systems would be the only people working on the project, and presenting their ideas to Nintendo often yielded mixed results. Common criticisms had to do with the game being too sophisticated or not balanced for the general audience. Makoto Shimojo, the game's art director at the time, decided to address these issues by making the game appeal to the GBA's target audience. So how do you get kids interested in your game? Bright visuals, colourful characters, funny writing? Apparently not, because they later found out that the game was purchased mainly by teenage boys. Oops. I mean, it's not hard to imagine why, given the game's subject matter, but regardless, Shimojo's art direction meant that anyone could appreciate it. Originally, there were no plans to release the game outside of Japan, and this was largely due to differences in taste. It was thought that a turn-based game would not do well overseas where action games were preferred. However, this all changed when the US marketing team got their hands on the game. As Nishimura recalls, the US marketing team approached the devs after playing the game and wanted to know why there were no plans to localize it. With the game being designed to appeal to as many people as possible, Nintendo took a chance and decided to localize the game for Western audiences. It was a gamble that would change the company's perception of Western tastes forever. So, did it pay off? The game was released on the 10th of September 2001 and was met with overwhelmingly positive reviews. It was a critical and commercial success, with many praising its simple yet deeply strategic gameplay. I have to say, it's a game that has aged very well despite being released 15 years ago. Many of the game's mechanics still hold up today, and the cartoony art style looks fantastic. The music is also catchy as heck, but it does get repetitive if you listen to it for too long. However, as great as the game was, the timing of the release was quite unfortunate, being the day before the 9/11 attacks. This led to the game's release being put on hold for every other region, including Japan. It would not be until 2004 that Japan got the game bundled with its sequel. Anyway, let's go a bit more in depth into the gameplay, shall we? The gameplay is simple. You and your opponent take turns commanding an army on a grid-based map. Victory is achieved when you complete the objective, which is usually to rout the enemy or capture their HQ. Units can be commanded to move, wait, or attack, and some units have special commands of their own, such as capturing structures. Move orders can be cancelled to help you plan your attack, but a unit's turn is used when you give it an action to perform, such as waiting, attacking, or capturing. All units have 10 health to begin with, and when it reaches 0, the unit is lost. But don't worry, unlike its RPG-infused cousin, units can be purchased from production facilities, so there's no fear of losing your beloved, beautiful, bow-wielding. There's no pressure to keep all your units alive by the end of the game. So far, it's been pretty easy to understand, but the real challenge comes from learning all the subtle game mechanics and using them to achieve victory. The tutorial at the beginning of the game does a great job of teaching players the basics of the game. It tells you everything you need to know to understand how the game works, but the finer details are left for you to discover yourself. And the beauty of it is that you only need to play the game to uncover the strategic depth that it offers. On top of that, commanding officers, or COs, augment troop stats to suit your style of play. Codes have strengths and weaknesses dictated by their personality, and it's cool to see these traits reflected in their units. Take Max for example, a big brute of a man that is fiercely loyal and has really big guns. All of his direct attack units receive a huge passive damage buff, but his skill with indirect units are not up to par, and so they are weaker and have less range than normal. There's also a power gauge that fills up over the course of the match, and it allows a Ko to unleash their Ko power, an ability that can turn the tide of battle or spell game over for your opponent. Choosing a Ko that suits your playstyle is part of the fun in the game. Do you choose a Ko who can just plow through a choke point with pure power? Or a Ko that can clear a choke point by raining down rockets from afar? Whatever your preferred playstyle is, there's a Ko to suit you. As fantastic as the gameplay is, the story isn't anything groundbreaking. You play as an advisor in the Orange Star Army, and your job is to drive back the Blue Moon forces that occupy Orange Star territory. By your side are 3 commanding officers, Andy, Max and Sammy. When you encounter Green Earth forces, it becomes obvious something fishy is going on, and it's up to you and your team to find out what. The characters are memorable and the dialogue can be quite funny at times, but the ending left me with more questions than answers. Also, I just want to mention that the antagonist looks like a cross between Princess Leia and Octavian. Just putting it out there. The weak story is not an issue however, as there are many other ways to play this game. Do you like multiplayer? I like multiplayer. This game has multiplayer. You have multi-cart multiplayer, single-cart multiplayer, and pass and play multiplayer, so you can literally pull this game out at any time and play with your friends. There are over 100 maps for you to choose and 11 Kos for you to play as well. And as if that wasn't enough, there's also a map creator for you to play around with as well. There's just no end to the amount of entertainment this one game can provide. My only gripe is the Fog of War mode. Theoretically, it's lots of fun. Your vision of the map is restricted to what your units can see. This means you need to scout ahead and use units you otherwise wouldn't for their utility in Fog of War. For example, recon units are fast and lightly armored, but they only carry machine gun, which makes them ineffective in combat. But during Fog of War, they have the longest vision radius of any unit, so they become invaluable. Units can only attack what they see, so carelessly rushing into battle is a good way to get your army turned into scrap. It sounds fun, right? Well, the problem lies in the AI. It can see the position of your units unless you hide them in woods. That might not sound like much, but it's really unfair when the AI doesn't play by the rules. It's a small issue and I don't think it ruins the Fog of War mode, but it just makes it a bit less fun. So, to conclude, Advance Wars is an absolute gem from the last decade. The level of detail and care that went into this game is honestly mind-blowing. Everything from the dynamic co-portraits during battle to the superb balancing. It's such a polished and well thought out game. To me, Advance Wars represents a milestone in Nintendo's history. It changed the way the game company viewed its Western audience, and without it, the Fire Emblem franchise wouldn't have made it overseas. It's a great game that any strategy enthusiast know everyone should play. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. This took way too long to make and I apologize for that. There will be a follow-up video about the rest of the Advance Wars franchise, so be on the lookout for that. Anyway, have a great day everyone.